are you?
I'm hanging in there. Same as
I love your
everybody.
post. I love
Okay,
your
we
post.
are live.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. To essentially an historic moment. I'd like to thank everybody for being here on YouTube and all of the meeting attendees. There's been a lot of work that's gone into bringing us to this point. And as I said, I believe this is an historic moment. We are, I guess, on some levels, once again, are reestablishing new norms in terms of principles of democracy and transparency with this meeting of ERCA. And I hope folks enjoy this, and as much as I think we all will, but I will, caution folks, there are going to be some challenges here as we try to get through this agenda from on the technical side of things. But we're going to do our best. So having said all of that, good evening and welcome to ERCA's first electronic board meeting. We have 18 members from around the county on our Zoom, and we are broadcasting our meetings live on ERCA's YouTube stream. I know many, if not all of you, have already participated in your own municipality's council or committee meetings electronically. You've all experienced some of the challenges that this style of meeting is going to present: audio, video choppiness, people cutting in and out, and just even the challenges of having the opportunity to speak when you'd want to raise an issue. Let's just be clear, I'm going to do my best to make sure that everybody who wants to speak to an issue has the opportunity to speak. And I think that we can allow for some flexibility within the rules in order to be able to make that happen. Before we do go any further, I just want to acknowledge the incredible work from the staff, starting with Richard and all of the senior leadership at ERCA for keeping the trains running on time with respect to the CA. Just generally speaking, the tremendous amount of work that has gone into adapting the way that we deliver services to the region through through this COVID pandemic, excuse me. In particular, I'd also like to acknowledge that Nicole, Aaron, and Brian for their work facilitating and enabling us to be able to even have this meeting in this format. The challenges as we can see, even just in the lead up to all of this, aren't insignificant by any stretch of the imagination. We're all trying to understand how to leverage this technology to be able to be transparent and accountable to the community that we all serve. And I think that our staff from top to bottom has participated in enabling that to happen. And tonight is the culmination of a lot of work and a lot of hard work that people have put in. So thank you for that. I believe all of you have Aaron and Brian's phone number. If you do experience a specific difficulty technical wise while we're going through the meeting, text or phone them and they will provide you with support members if you do run into some of those challenges. Finally, before we begin, again, I just want to thank all of you, our board members, for your patience, your willingness to continue to be engaged and serve the Conservation Authority, even through all of these challenges and changing processes. So let's start. Let's take a roll call. I want to confirm the attendance of folks here at the meeting, attending the board members attending the meeting. We're going to start in alphabetical order. Just one last thing before we, on a technical side, muting your line when you're not speaking helps. If you don't have your device muted, then any of the background noise that's happening where you are will be broadcast throughout the on the channel here that we're broadcasting over, and it could be distracting for some folks and the folks that are watching on YouTube. So I'll start the roll call. Please, after your name is called, unmute and answer. So let's start with Councillor Peter Courtney.
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Councillor.
I'm trying to mute though. I don't know how to mute. Sorry to cut you off.
I think if you look on if you tap the screen, I'm not sure what kind of device you are, the microphones are the microphone function is typically on the bottom left.
Okay, I'm gonna mute right now and then talk.
Okay. Well, Councillor,
okay, I found it.
Okay, I'm going to keep going through it. Marilyn Morrison. Marilyn, are you with us? Okay, Councillor Morley Bowman. Councillor
Present. I'm
Present.
here.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vanderdolen. Okay, Councillor Lucier.
Here.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patterson.
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bailey.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Janice.
Present.
Councillor Carrick.
Here.
Councillor Jacobs.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Verbeke.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Becchetti.
Here.
Vice Chair Jobin.
Present. Welcome.
Hi, Tanya. Mayor Dilkins. Okay, Mayor Dilkins is absent. Councillor Morrison
Present.
and Councillor Sleeman.
Present.
Okay, we do have regrets from Councillor Meloche from Pelee Island.
A point of order, this is Vanderdolen. I'm here after all.
Okay, Councillor Vanderdolen, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Kieran, it's
I
good to
was on-
Charlie, I'm here.
Councillor Desjardins, thank you. Okay. I'm going to ask. for all
Kieran,
your
I have a
indulgence as we
question
go
for you.
through this. I'm going to struggle through this just like everyone else. So let's get to the land acknowledgement. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island, North America, who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. We raise your hand, please. Okay, thank you. So are there any declarations of pecuniary interests? If there are, please either raise your hand. If I don't acknowledge, perhaps even type into the Zoom chat window. Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Jacobs,
I'll second.
seconded by Councillor
Jobin.
Jobin. The way that we'll proceed there, I'll just ask if there's anyone who is opposed. Otherwise, I'll assume that folks are in favor. So having said that, are there anyone opposed? Is anyone opposed to the agenda? Hearing none, that's carried. Okay, so on to the reports. BD 08-2020 proposed amendments to ERCA bylaw A1 administrative procedures to accommodate emergency electronic participation in meetings. Richard, you're on.
Thank you. First, I'd like to confirm that people can actually hear me.
Yes,
Thumbs
we
up,
can hear
perfect.
you very well.
Thank you.
Yes, Richard.
So a little bit of background to this one. In 2018, we amended our administrative bylaws. At the time, we did not include an electronic participation. At the time, none of our municipalities had electronic participation either. When this pandemic came upon us, the municipalities were allowed to meet electronically under their Emergency Measures Act and the changes that were made there. That did not apply to conservation authorities. So many conservation authorities did not have language in their bylaws to allow us to meet electronically, including ERCA. So we actually needed a special directive from the minister to allow us to hold a special meeting to approve an amendment to the bylaw to allow us to meet electronically. So long as that meeting can be held and other public or other meetings that we have can be held publicly. So that's what the amendment to the bylaws is this evening, to allow us to meet electronically during emergency situations. Not something that would be open to non-emergency requirements of meetings. There is still a preference, obviously, to meet in person whenever we can, but recognizing that in some cases, in the case of emergencies, we do need to meet electronically. So those are the amendments that are there before you. Again, a copy of the minister's directive is also in the package. We are required and will post both the amendment to the bylaws as well as the minister's directive to our website to make sure that that's clear all around. And that again is the reason why we are broadcasting on YouTube tonight as well, to ensure that we can be publicly accessible. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Richard. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, seeing none. Can I get a motion to receive the report? Councillor
Make-
Waterton,
And I would second it.
seconded by Councillor Desjardins. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll just ask again, is anyone opposed? And that, okay, seeing none, that motion is carried. Okay, that brings us to the adjournment. We just for those that are watching live on YouTube, we're not adjourning. We simply had to have a special meeting in order to approve this, the video conferencing as a practice. We will be reconvening immediately. There'll be no interruption of the broadcast or the live stream to get into the let's call it the more official business of our meeting today. So having said that, can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Jobin. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, we will adjourn this special meeting. And I will now call the Essex County Conservation Authority Board of Directors meeting to order. Let me get my, here we go. As we've just taken the roll call in the special meeting of ERCA, I'll just take a moment to confirm there's nobody that's joined us since we did the original roll call.
My apologies, Marilyn Morrison was joined to the call in the middle of the meeting, of the special meeting.
Ms. Morrison, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Okay, having said that, so she will be added to the roll. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I can see most of you, so raise your hand. Seeing none, we can proceed with the evening's agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Carrick, seconded by Councillor Janice. Anyone opposed? That carries. Hearings, we have no hearings. Adoption of the minutes. Looking for a motion for the minutes of the February 13th meeting of the Board of Directors. Deputy Mayor Becchetti, seconded by Councillor Desjardins. Anyone opposed? Seeing none. Okay, we're rolling. We also need a motion. Yep. Hello.
Karen, hello.
Yes.
Yes. I don't have a camera here, and just by sound, if we have a motion or a question, how we entertain the question?
Councillor, if you have a question, just seeing as how you're not on video, if you do have a question, just please chime in at the appropriate moment. And as well, if you do have if you do want to record your opposition to a particular motion, just articulate that verbally.
And how do we communicate with you? That's my question, really. If I don't have a camera, I can't wave my hand, you can't see me. Can we say communicate possibly with Nicole and she keep people in the queue?
Yes, if you do want to speak, okay. But in your case, Councillor, because I can't see you, and you're the that you could just at the moment where I ask for folks to to articulate their whether they're opposed or not opposed to a motion, or if they would like to speak to a motion at the appropriate moment, just go ahead and chime in at that point with you know, excuse me, Mr. Chair, something along those lines.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen.
Okay, so having said that, we do need a motion now to approve the minutes from the John R. Park Homestead Advisory Committee meeting at February 24th, 2020. Can I get a mover? Councillor Lucier, seconded by Councillor Desjarlais. Do we have anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Business arising from a previous meeting. I don't have any items there unless someone wants to chime in with something. Okay, so moving in through the agenda to the announcements. Keep my announcements brief this evening. I know all of our municipalities are looking at changes in business practices, programs, and services, and policies and protocols. ERCA has gone through similar changes, which we will have further discussion about this evening. I do want to thank ERCA for continuing to keep the conservation areas open. I think it's a really important service that the Conservation Authority provides to the region, and it's our administration has really gone the extra mile with respect to maintaining those and maintaining the availability of those spaces responsibly, and also want to thank them for continuing to keep us informed about high waters and flooding, for finding ways to issue permits remotely, and for ensuring that all of those programs, supports, GIS, payroll, finance, reporting, finding funding are all in place to keep ERCA open. I did have a chance to speak with Richard recently, and I'd like to echo his thanks to the ERCA staff, many of whom will be watching tonight on YouTube. Who've created and implemented new approaches and protocols while working remotely. It is amazing to see how we're all really adapting to the new normal. And the management team here for developing and implementing a pandemic response plan in record time. Special thanks to Brian in the our IT department for ensuring our remote staff have the tools and access they need, and to Nicole for her leadership putting this plan together. So having said all of that, we have no moving through delegations. We have no delegations. So this is the real meaty part of our meeting here today, the update on ERCA's operation response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Before I ask Richard again, I just want to point out that we do have more information with a revised resolution on the screen related to this the spring restoration program, our tree planting, and it's unfortunate that we have to have a recommendation that we're moving in this direction, but I think necessary. So having said that, Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I won't get into a lot of the details. I'm happy to respond to questions about some of the other items that are described in that report in terms of some of the changes that we've made to accommodate our business practices and our programs and services. As we noted in the report, the one piece that was still under review by many conservation authorities is how to deliver spring tree planting programs responsibly while respecting the provincial and federal directives regarding physical distancing, and certainly keeping in mind the health of and safety of our staff as well as the community. So we've gone through a couple of reviews with our staff, looking again at what other CAs are doing, what Conservation Ontario has been looking at. And we started dividing the spring tree planting program into two components. The first one being our large stock and seedling handout. This is something we do every year, where trees and shrubs are purchased in advance by landowners, and they're picked up at one of our distribution centers, and then the landowners take those back and plant them back in their own on their own properties. The trees, again, are already paid for. We'll be arranging those time slots with landowners, in which case they can come and pick that up. It's sort of the same model as anyone who's picked up groceries at a grocery store or other facility where they've done that sort of curbside pickup model. And so based on our operating procedures that we've developed in conjunction with industry and others, we feel that we can deliver that component of the program while still maintaining those distancing and still sort of respecting the health and safety of our staff and of the clients who will come and actually pick up the trees, put them in their vehicle or trailer, and go away with them. So our staff will be arranging the trees for pickup, but having no interaction with the landowners beyond that. The second part of our spring program is really the block plantings that we do, mostly using equipment. And this is one where it's a little bit more challenging to deliver, because it's hard to maintain, again, some of those physical distances. As an example, while sitting on the back of a tree planting program. First, and another part of that is to do something like that safely. And in other areas, they've looked at how important, and we all know how important the need of personal protective equipment is, or PPEs. And we're limited in terms of some of the PPEs that we can provide for staff. So there is some challenges there in terms of ensuring that there is that safety component to staff. And we obviously would like to see any PPEs available be made available to medical teams and medical services and personnel as a first point. So there's also some concern there with respect to, even if we had that equipment, the efficiency of the program, because of the procedures that we'd have to put in place around distancing, around protecting the staff that are on the equipment. It would really reduce the efficiency of that program, we estimate, by about 60%. So it would take that much longer and cost that much more to deliver. And then when you combine that with the availability of stock, which right now is also a question from the nurseries and from the sector, because they rely on migrant workers in order to prep the materials for distribution to conservation authorities and other planting partners. And there's obviously, as we know, some challenges with respect to migrant workers as it relates to isolation timelines and things like that as well. So the best case scenario is that we'd likely get fewer plants and we get them much later in the season. And in our region, if we get plants later in the season, that has a significant impact on the health and the growth rates of and survival rates, I should say, of those trees. So for these reasons, we're actually recommending that we cancel that part of our tree program, that we continue to deliver that curbside model around the trees that are already purchased for pickup by residents, but that we not deliver the spring tree planting program through the equipment for the reasons that I just described. We'd be looking at redeploying some of our staff that are part of that program to some of our other conservation areas and conservation needs, hazard tree removal, maintenance, those types of projects. And I should note, we've also checked and confirmed with a lot of our funders, because of course, the planting of trees and the tree planting program is heavily subsidized by third-party funding and grants and contributions that we do get. And those funders are willing, not just for us, but for other conservation authorities and agencies, to extend those planting timelines to the fall and or spring of 2021, because of course, a lot of our funding is tied to the numbers of trees that we plant. So if we can't plant trees this year, then there's an impact of funding. But again, the funding partners are willing to extend those timelines. And finally, I do want to put a note out to our staff. We work really hard to try to find ways of delivering that program, and certainly a region like ours, any opportunity to plant trees is essential. We need that from an ecological perspective, from a climate change perspective, a mitigation perspective, to create habitats. And certainly our staff are very passionate and very focused on trying to find ways to do that. But for the reasons that we described with respect to the COVID pandemic, it's really challenging, that we feel it's really challenging to do so in a way that meets the health and safety needs of our staff and clients, and will lead to a successful tree plant down the road as well. And so as an amendment to the resolution that was in your report, we're actually proposing that we cancel that part of the program for this year. And again, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions, or Kevin is around as well on the call. And if there's any questions from a technical perspective, happy to answer those also.
Thank you, Richard. Just to be clear, the question, Richard, has the amended motion been circulated to all of the members?
The report spoke to the fact that we would bring more information to this meeting tonight. So the amended motion is on screen tonight, but it has not yet been circulated to the members.
Okay, so maybe before, would it be okay? Maybe I should read the motion, or someone should read the motion that we're going to be discussing, or that we're going to be debating. Why don't I just go ahead and do that? And I don't know if it's, well, let me just read it. And if folks have questions.
It is on the screen, but maybe you want to read it anyway.
Oh, no, it is on. Thank you, Counselor. It's on the screen. So that is the amended motion that we're looking to bring forward. I note that Councillor Vanderdolen is wanting to speak. Councillor Vanderdolen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, of course, I wouldn't vote against such a recommendation, since you can't really argue with the health and safety of staff. it's really disappointing. This is one of the main reasons for our existence. I'm very sad we can't do this this year. Is there any way, you say reduce efficiency by 60%? I know at least one person on your list who is waiting anxiously to be planted this year. Is there any way you could do, say, 1 out of 20 projects or 2 out of 20 projects? Just a couple of the smaller ones? Thanks.
I'm going to pass that one over to Kevin, who can speak to the technical aspects of that program.
Through you, Chair. One of the biggest problems that we face as a staff right now is being able to source out and find protective equipment for our staff. We face a real challenge there. The primary issue is being able to find masks. We can find gloves, we can order gloves, we can get hand sanitizer, but ultimately we cannot find masks. And I think this is in the news quite commonly right now, that there's a lot of shortages in that regard. So even if we are able to get the trees and get the staff, we could very quickly run into a situation where we don't have adequate protection measures for the staff to undertake the planting the planting, and then we have a whole bunch of trees and are not able to do that. Right now, we can't find masks at all. We don't have any for any of our field planting staff. So that's one of the primary drivers behind this is just making sure that we have to proceed in a way that's appropriate for staff.
Well, I suspect that you're going to get suddenly a lot of masks on the market, but I could see that would hold it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Verbicki's next, but before I proceed, and Deputy Mayor, just if you'll indulge me, it's been pointed out to me that both Councillor Sleeman and Councillor Courtney are on the phone. So I think I should read the motion, given that they aren't able to see it. So I'll just go ahead and read it. So the administrative recommendation is that report BD 09/20 regarding ERCA's operation in response to the COVID-19 pandemic be received for information, and further, that ERCA proceed with the distribution of trees to paid customers in a safe manner following federal and provincial recommendations, and further, that because of uncertainties related to the availability of quality stock and related to availability and quality of stock, increased costs and reduced efficiencies as a result of changes to operating procedures, the health and safety of our staff and our community, ERCA cancel all tree planting projects for spring 2020. So I hope that helps Councillor Courtney and Councillor Sleeman. Deputy Mayor, you're up.
Thank you very much,
you so much.
Chair. I just
We
got a
appreciate
question
it.
of another councillor that sits on Leamington, and we are in the Lower Thames, has told me that they are continuing with their tree planting program. So I didn't know, does Richard know if they contacted, or are they doing something different, or I'm not sure. I just want to make sure that, like you say, what Chris said, we don't miss the boat and we can get the trees in. But if they're doing it, we're not. I don't know why. Just a question.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. And I do know that as conservation authorities, we've met and talked about this a lot, and many CAs are going to still try to find a way to deliver it. Others aren't. I'm not sure what their protocols are and what they've developed. I do know that they will be taking a similar motion to their board, and I believe their board was meeting or is meeting today as well. So I'm not sure if they've had a resolution on that. Their funding is a little different in that they have extra supports that are there. There's likely still going to be some questions with respect to stock and availability of stock. So they may be proceeding, but they may still have some of the same challenges that we have in terms of uncertainties around what actually might get in the ground at the end of the day. We want to sort of take a step up a little bit and just make it known perhaps a little earlier so that people can plan accordingly.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Verbicki. Richard, I do have at least a question or two on this. First, going back to the trees, we're seeing the canceling the tree planting projects for the spring. What types, and I know it's really hard to understand what we might be able to do in the medium term. I'm thinking in the fall, but given the in terms of the 60% reduction in the trees that we'd be able to plant for the entire year, to what extent could we make up that ground if we could get into a fully operational in the fall?
There's a couple of things there, and I'll have Kevin clarify if I speak incorrectly here. But the two parts of the program, the handouts that we'll be doing are largely large stock, but also some seedling stock. Those trees have already been prepped last fall because they're potted stock and they're larger stock. That's different from the seedling stock and the conifer stock that we are planting usually through this equipment, through this machine planting. My understanding, and again, Kevin can correct me, this type of planting isn't really able to be done in the fall. So it would have to be shifted to next spring, and we'd certainly hope that we can shift all of our planting partners, and again, all of the funding that goes along with it, to next spring as well, just because of the nature of the trees that we plant and the success rate based on our own past practices. The seedling stock is best planted in the spring rather than the fall. Some of our outreach projects and programs that we have done and that we have lined up for this year, we're shifting those to the fall because in a lot of cases, those rely on large stock programs or large stock plantings. We're also looking at shifting sites like our Soltz Forest, for instance, which is largely large stock. That'll be shifted to the fall as well. So where we can shift programs to the fall, we will, but a lot of the seedling stock needs to be planted in the spring. Hopefully I spoke correctly, Kevin.
If I may, through you, Chair, just to add a comment that oftentimes the issue associated with planting trees in fall in our heavy clay soil is frost heave. Ultimately, the trees don't have time to root. And they are literally pushed out of the ground in fall. So we oftentimes see greater than 50% mortality with the trees the following spring if we try planting them in fall. Having said that, we are going to be doing it on a trial basis this fall. We're going to see how it goes. We would have to plant the trees in September to give them a bit of time to root into the ground so they don't pop up over the winter time. So we are going to be trying a little bit of that, and any of the large stock that, as Richard noted, that we've postponed in terms of planting those will all be planted in fall. So we're going to be planting all the large stock, and we're going to try doing some fall planting with our machine planter. One thing I should also address through Councillor Vanderdolen's request is if there are a couple of small projects, if these were projects that were just very basic, straightforward windrows or something along those lines, landowners will have the opportunity to convert that so that if we were planting those trees, we might be able to set it up so that they can then just come and pick up those trees as part of our tree planting order, and then they can go and plant them if they really want to do it that way. So there is a bit of a latitude there for some of the smaller tree plantings.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Mooney. I guess maybe just one last question. I know there are other speakers, so but just real quick, the last thing I wanted to have a better understanding of, and I know you alluded to it to some extent, Richard, to what extent do you think in 2021, assuming we can get back up to full capacity, would we be able to make up the ground we lost in 2020?
I'll have Kevin speak to that as well. He knows better how many trees we were planning on planting this spring and then what would be shifted to next spring.
Through you, Chair, what I'd suggest is that we actually look at what happened last year as experience. Last year, we had literally a really very poor planting season due to extended rainfall. Many of the sites were never fit enough to plant trees in because of the flooding that was occurring, because of the saturated soils. If you recall, many farm fields didn't get planted until July. So along those same lines, many of our tree planting projects were postponed last year. I don't think we lost a single landowner as it relates to opportunities to push that project forward to this spring. And although they will be disappointed, I think that this is what they want as landowners. And I think the vast majority of projects will simply be shifted into 2021. And that we'll have to work with our funding partners to ensure that the funding's in place to plant hopefully about double what we're planning on doing this year. Right now, this year, we're planning on planting about 75,000 trees this year. That's what we originally had on order. And the goal would obviously be to do over 100,000 next year.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. Councillor Bowman, you have a question. The floor is yours. Councillor Bowman, are you with us?
I think your line is muted, Councillor Bowman.
I'm okay now.
There we go. We can hear you.
My question has been answered, so I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Sleeman.
Like I put my name forward for, how do you say, to read the amended motion, which is you did, and I thank you for doing it, by the way. Because first, like, I don't have the camera, I don't have the computer that everybody have, and you can't see me raising my hand. So at one time I asked, like, how could we communicate? And I think you explained it very well. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Councillor Sleeman. Are there any other questions with respect to the report and the administrative recommendation?
We have a motion.
Yeah, seeing no question, the motion has been recommended. There's the recommended motion from administration. Councillor Sleeman, is that, are you moving that?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Sleeman.
I am moving the administration recommendation of the amended motion, yes.
Okay, is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
I see Councillor Bowman raised his hand. I'm sorry if I missed somebody else who chimed in on that one, but I only have a limited screen here right now that I'm working from. Councillor Bowman, so seconded by Councillor Bowman. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for, again, similar to how, as we've established, if anyone is opposed to this motion, please articulate that. If we get a number of folks that are opposed, then we will go for a, we will maybe have to do a recorded vote, but I'll just ask the question in this format at this point. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. It was a tough one, but I think we made the right choice there. Okay, next up we have BD 10/20 Flood Advisory Program and High Lake Levels. Mr. Burney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are facing, again, we hit the record last year, and unfortunately with how we've been monitoring levels so far this year, we're going to exceed the levels that we hit last year. Beginning of April, both Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie were approximately 1 foot, 300 millimeters higher than last year at the same time, day for day. So far through the winter months and in early spring, we've had more than 7 flooding events that we've issued advisories for, and have assisted the municipality in surveying flood elevations and identifying for them various advice during those events. Most significantly, at the moment, we work very closely with the City of Windsor on updating their emergency response plans and some of their emergency response protocols. Working very closely with the town of Tecumseh, who has shown extreme leadership with respect to updating their emergency response plans and establishing very significant emergency response protocols. We're going to be meeting with their staff next week on some active processes across some private properties and implementing some very significant earthworks and berm works that we are initiating as a result of the emergency declaration from His Worship and Council. Municipality of Leamington has actually risen to the challenge on several areas out on Point Pelee Drive that has suffered significant flooding. And again, the County of Essex and the Municipality of Leamington should be commended again in their response processes. We are currently sorting through some other issues that have reared its head on some private properties, and we're going to be working with those private property owners, the Municipality of Leamington and the County of Essex, and hopefully providing some resolution to heading off a couple of significant breaches. In the case of Point Pelee Drive, a breach of Point Pelee Drive will flood some 5,000 acres of inland flood-prone area. So hopefully we're going to be in a position to implement some protocols and also some actual activities out in that area. With respect to Pelee Island was devastated over the last two flood events, specifically on West Shore Road. $13 million worth of shoreline improvements, unfortunately, will be exceeded in dollar values. And we're going to be working with the island and coming up with current estimates and putting that together and submitting those for actual numbers to have available for federal and provincial sources of potential requests for money. So it's been a challenging early season so far. And again, levels that we could be seeing at the peak will exceed last year's levels. The amount of the exceedance will only be determined based on climatic conditions from now through to June and July.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burney. Board members, are there any questions for Mr. Burney? Okay, just one. Oh, sorry, I see Deputy Mayor Becchetti.
Thank you, Karen. Just a question, Tim. Thank you for that, and thank to James Bryant there with his, I call them daily, weekly updates to the municipalities. Are very much appreciated. The question I have with, in particular, the Lake St. Clair, we had a resident inquire. You mentioned there 12 inches lake level, but in terms of Lake St. Clair along Riverside Drive, what are some of the numbers you're seeing there in terms of, causing for concern? As you know, we had an emergency meeting today, and we are looking at doing some work on private lands there to do some berm to try to keep the overland flooding. But what kind of levels are we talking about there along that stretch?
Through you, Mr. Chair, levels vary. Protection level is a consistent level, but the protection levels vary according to existing grade, existing break walls, how far the setback that we can attain from the lake. Lake wave energy dissipates the further we get from the breaker zone and or the break wall at the shoreline. So we're going to see variation in protection levels on each property, but on average within the town of Tecumseh, on some of those properties that we are concerned of, the range will be anywhere between 0.5 of a meter upwards to 0.7 to 0.8 of a meter, depending on those grade levels. And so some of those earthworks that we are going to anticipate advising the municipality on, again, will vary accordingly. For reference, we're approximately a meter above average levels on Lake St. Clair. But again, depending upon the land elevation and the elevation of the appurtenance on each private property, that will vary towards what we have to do for protection levels on those properties.
Thank you, Mr. Burney. Councillor Jacobs, you had a question or questions?
Towards Tim, with the flooding starting earlier this year, and you say the lake levels are even higher, are we expediting permits for these individuals that have to do some work in a, I guess, an expedited manner? Is there any holdback, or will they be able to go ahead with those projects?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Last year at this day for day, we'd accepted and were processing 199 applications for permit. As of today, we are at 325 applications for permit. Many of those being emergency type break wall repairs. Those are basically pushed in the queue to be issued immediately. We are struggling with timelines, obviously, because of the new world that we are working through electronically. I want to commend my staff and James in my absence earlier of getting things online and electronically getting us in a position to respond most quickly. Again, on any emergency approvals that are required, we are expediting those and getting those out. Most of the contractors that are available to undertake this work in the region understand the processes and know how to get a hold of us, and are being very creative with many methods, some including shoving applications in my mailbox at home. But they're all taken and putting into the queue, and we're expediting those appropriately.
Okay, if I may add, Tim, though, do you have to do many site inspections before some of this work takes place, or are you going by the contractor's recommendations? I know that, with this COVID situation, your staff is unable to attend all those properties.
Through you, Mr. Chair, attendance is mandatory for anything other than very simple repairs, in that some of the processes that are being put forward, people may innocently find themselves getting themselves in harm's way by, there's a lot of work being put forward in the form of wave deflection and wave deflectors on the top of sheet steel walls. Sheet steel walls older than 20 years old are already well into deterioration and approaching the midpoint of the design lifetime. So attempting welding a wave deflector or bolting a wave deflector atop of that structure will actually cause that structure to go into failure, rotational failure and or snap tiebacks, or create other structural problems with that wall. So all applications for permit for more than very simple repairs, and a simple repair would be adding a little bit of rock or welding a channel cap. Anything more than that, our surveyor, our water management technician, James Bryan, and or myself are attempting to fly by quickly and assure that the work that's being proposed by property owners and contractors meets appropriate standards, and are expediting those as well.
If I may add to that, Councillor Jacobs, we do have protocols in place whereby we do contact the landowners so that we reduce or eliminate any interaction from our staff's perspective as well as the landowner perspective. So we do have proper procedures in place where we can do those visits safely, and if we can't, we find other ways of doing that. So that is in place. And in response, if I may, to your earlier question as well, we do know that the Premier's office has limited new construction. That doesn't impact on any shoreline works that may be coming forward. Those shoreline works, as Tim has described, would be deemed as emergency works. There would be no shoreline works done for any new construction, obviously because the construction isn't completed yet. But for those emergency works, we will be continuing to issue those permits.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Burney? Just one question from me, Mr. Burney. You did touch on it to some extent. Let's say there was a flood event that did require some form of evacuation. I just wonder about what I'm sure that I know that there's been discussion with the emergency committee. I forget their technical name. So just maybe walk me through the broad strokes of what that looks like if there is a need for an evacuation, and how we handle those types of situations.
Through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to full-on flood response and the challenges associated with COVID, Emergency Management Ontario and all our local CEMCs are modifying those response protocols even as we speak. Each municipality is taking a look at what its emergency response plan is dictating, what it's identifying for reception areas, and providing those direction to their ratepayer with respect to those protocols. First and foremost, though, people are encouraged to identify who they are, where they are, and where they might be going, attending anything from friends and family and or reporting back to the municipality to their prescribed reception centers. But with respect to evacuations, mandatory or otherwise, those are the purview of the municipality through their CEMC and the emergency response coordinator. And ratepayers are all advised to contact the affected municipality directly. And if they are concerned today about what those protocols are, they should contact the CEMC and or their designate directly for that, as the municipality are responsible directly for those evacuation and emergency response protocols.
So I guess maybe just, and thank you for that, just there's obviously ongoing communication, however, between the emergency management folks and ERCA with respect to flood lake levels and all of that, though, as to the extent that they can be warned that these things may be happening and where there may be a flood event. Obviously those community warnings are happening. I imagine there's a heightened level of communication between the emergency management folks and ERCA on that front as well.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. In response to you, Mr. Chair, again, we have had almost bi-weekly meetings with emergency measures control groups and the CEMCs of all municipalities to again go over our responsibilities leading up to a flood event, our responsibilities during a flood event, and the municipalities' responsibilities directly with managing evacuation and evacuation centers and reception centers. And unfortunately, with respect to COVID, that is still a moving target with many municipalities, wherein reception centers that were identified and evacuation centers that were identified have had to be modified accordingly to ensure that health and safety of both those requiring evacuation and those responding to and providing and operating those evacuation centers, that everyone is safe. And those protocols, again, are best communicated through the municipality CEMC and the emergency response coordinators of the affected municipality.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Burney. Are there any other questions for Mr. Burney? Okay. Can I get is there a motion to receive the report?
I'll move to receive the report.
Councillor Morrison, seconded by
Councillor Slayman.
Councillor Lucier. Again, I'll call or is there any further discussion? Okay, so I'll call the question again, asking for anyone to articulate opposition if they are opposed. Seeing and hearing none, that motion passes. Now moving on to BD 11/20. Now this is an update on the many grant funding applications that ERCA staff have put forward. We do know that on Tuesday, we learned that the RBC grant request for data-driven decision-making for a changing climate in partnership with the University of Windsor was approved. We do hope to hear about other approvals soon, and I think Richard is going to fill us in about some of the other grant applications that are out there and pending. Richard?
Actually, I don't have anything new to report on those. I'm happy to answer any questions, or any of the directors on the call can answer any questions if there's specific questions about any of the applications that are in front of us.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, the report was pretty much enumerated all of the grant applications and what they are for. So are there any questions on this?
You have a question, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering, when I'm looking at all these grants and the descriptions, which is all great, I'm just wondering if we couldn't get a little more description of the locations of where some of these are taking place. And obviously I'm not going to ask administration to bring that forward all right now, but when I'm reading them, they're interesting, but I really just don't know where in the county we are talking about. So if for future reports, if we could consider a little better description of the locations, that would be great.
We
Thank
can
you.
certainly do that. And I would note in some cases, an application is there for pilot studies, but in many cases, those pilot studies locations haven't been yet identified. So in some cases, we're putting applications forward. And then we know generally of projects that might be in place, but we will certainly endeavor to add more clarity geographically in the future.
Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have a question.
Councillor Sleeman?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I think it's along the same line what my colleague Jim had been asking. Like I see that ERCA, which is great, my compliment to them, they're asking for kind of quite a bit of money. It's not awfully a lot, but it's enough to do some major actually renovation and so on. One thing, the one that caught my attention, everything it says requested. Do we have any idea or any news that the provincial government or the federal government going to give us some of this money, all what we have requested, or part of it, just to give us an idea of where we're going from here?
I'll actually ask Mr. Money to respond to that. He is aware more of some of those applications to federal and provincial, and he can speak generally to when some of these applications traditionally get reviewed and accepted.
Yeah.
Richard, one of the things we do, like we ask for money from the provincial and the federal government, but usually this money is being leveraged by some other possibly investor, but from municipalities and so on. Are we getting some money from the municipality to add to what we have been asking from the government?
Through you, Chair, I'll try to respond to both of those questions. To try to respond to the first one in terms of timing, we don't have any assurances for any of these grants. They go through a competitive process, and we are happy to receive a portion of them. We have had a great deal of success, especially with the Environment Canada grants for a number of years, and we would hope that success continues into the future. Often our success is tied, for instance, to the critical need down in this area for the multiple species at risk that we have, for poor water quality and those types of things. So that actually gives us a bit of a competitive advantage compared to some of the other organizations that are applying for this funding, just due to the current state of our local environment. Many of these grants are, we will probably receive notice during the summertime. July and August is the expected notice period when we will receive that. They go through a review period that usually takes about 4 to 5 months with either the province or the federal government. And then, I'm sorry, Councillor Seaman, can you repeat your second question?
Yeah, it's really the simple question is, can we leverage this money somehow? It depends where it's going. If it's going to one municipality or 2 or 3 municipalities, can we ask those municipalities to contribute so much money so we can do more instead of just those projects?
Okay.
Leveraging.
Yeah, so for the vast majority of these projects, there is a leveraging contribution built into them. We didn't dictate what that was, but that's already built in. So the contribution is through our general levy. So for instance, the Holiday Beach Capital Project, we leveraged our existing and forecasted capital budgets towards that grant as an example of works that we need to do that's already in the capital plan. And for various restoration-based projects, we either used our existing clean water green spaces as leverage, or oftentimes we have multi-year agreements with private donors such as American Forest or Ontario Power Generation. They're longstanding partners, or we have multi-year agreements. So we're able to leverage those in order to seek additional funding from the federal and provincial governments.
So really, the leverage is being built into it. When we get the money, the leverage is there, and the municipalities involved would know what their contribution will be.
That's exactly correct.
I want to thank you so much for doing it, by the way. It's good news.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sleeman. Are there any other questions, board members? Seeing none.
We have a motion to move it forward.
Okay, moving the it's a motion to receive, made by Councillor Sleeman, seconded by Councillor Bowman. Again, asking for anyone opposed. Seeing none, that passes. Okay. Moving on to BD 12/20, designation of Ashley Giori, regulations analyst as provincial offenses officer and enforcement of public safety and security orders. You see the motion on the left. Is there any, does anyone have any questions on this motion or on this issue? Okay,
I say move the recommendation.
Deputy Mayor Becchetti moves.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Jobin. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? That passes. Okay, BD 1320, ERCA committee and advisory board membership. Had to shuffle the deck a little bit here as a result of some administrative changes. We just need, we're just going to need the motion to, I guess, receive that. No, we have to actually make some.
Move the recommendation.
So the motion was that. Oh, sorry. Okay, I see a few folks who want.
I'll move it. Len Janice moves it.
I'll support it.
Okay, let me just back up a second. Do we have any questions? No. Okay, seeing none. Councillor Janice moved the motion, seconded by Councillor Desjardins. Any opposition? Seeing none, that passes. BD 14, the Watershed Management Services Report. See the motion, is it on the screen at this point? Or do we need excuse me, sorry, do we need the Environment Registry reports for comment? So you see the correspondence, all right, so we are at BD 14, the Watershed Management Services Report. Can I get a mover? So Councillor Jacobs. Oh, Councillor Courtney, there you are. Councillor Courtney, you're seconding the motion? Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. We have some correspondence. I need a motion to receive the well, are there any questions on the correspondence? There's a few items in there. Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive?
I'll move it.
Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Ms. Morrison.
Yep.
Is any further discussion? Anyone opposed? Okay, that passes. So moving back into the committee of the whole, new business none. Other business. The next meeting of the board of the board of directors will be May 14th. Is that still true? By the way, I'll just ask that. I'll ask Richard.
Sure, that's the next scheduled meeting of the board, and traditionally our May and October meetings are at the call of the chair if there's business that does need to be carried. So we hold it in case there is a business meeting. At this point, I don't anticipate that going forward.
Okay, so if there is a meeting, it will be on the 14th. If it's at the call of the chair. If not, we won't. Well, you just heard Richard. It may be later on. Into the spring or the summer. So now we just need a motion to adjourn. We do have the Source Protection Authority. Again, we're not totally wrapped up here yet. We do have the Source Protection Authority meeting that will convene immediately after this meeting adjourns, just so everybody's aware, for board members as well as the public, who I'm sure are watching in droves as this meeting proceeds. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Bowman. Anyone opposed? Well done, everybody. Congratulations. That was wonderful. We are adjourned. Now, I will call to order the Source Protection Authority meeting. I'll just once again reconfirm the role. If anyone joined us late, and I note that Councillor Courtney is now on the video, but was with us the entire time over the phone. But if anyone has joined us after we originally convened the meeting of the ERCA board, just speak now. Otherwise, we'll assume it's the same role that we've had since the beginning of the ERCA board meeting. Okay, hearing no one declare their presence. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Anyone you can raise your hand. I figured out how to look at it, how to see everybody now. Just toggle down. Of course, there's also Councillor Sleeman and Councillor Sleeman who's on the phone. No declarations of pecuniary interest. I need a motion now to approve the agenda. Can I get a Deputy Mayor Verbicki, seconded by Councillor Bowman? Anyone opposed? Seeing none, adoption of the minutes. So that motion carries. Now we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. Of the minutes of the December 12th, 2019 meeting. Motion, any discussion or any questions on the minutes? No? Okay, can I get a motion to receive? Councillor Lucier, seconded.
I'll second it.
Councillor Desjardins. Anyone opposed? That carries. The Source Protection Committee, that the minutes from the Source Protection Committee for a meeting on January the 8th. Questions? Direction?
Move it.
Councillor
Janice
Green,
moves it.
seconded by Deputy Mayor Bailey. Anyone opposed? And that carries. Delegations, none. Reports. ERSPA 0120, the Essex County Source Protection Authority Annual Progress Report. Any questions on that? Seeing none, looking for a mover.
So moved.
Deputy Mayor Verbicki, seconded by.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Courtney, thank you. Anyone opposed? That passes. The Source Protection Area Risk Management Official Annual Progress Report. Questions on this report? Seeing none, looking for direction.
Move to receive.
Councillor Jobin, seconded by.
I'll
Councillor
second.
Jacobs.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Okay, Committee of the Whole. Moving on to the Committee of the Whole and the other business. The next meeting of the Essex Region Source Protection Authority will be held at the call of the chair. And now we will move towards adjournment. Can I get actually just thank you all once again for everybody, board members, administration, for those of you and all of our staff, and for everybody who is watching the proceedings here. Thank you for staying with us as we struggled through this. It was a challenge, but I think we set the standard with respect to transparency and accountability in the region. And I know that there are other municipalities and democratic institutional bodies that are doing the same type of work that we're doing. And I hope that this is an example of what it is that we can do, or even do better than, moving forward for all of us. So thank you, everybody, for helping us plod through this. Stay safe, stay home, and wash your hands. I need that motion now. Motion to adjourn.
I'll move adjournment.
Ms. Morrison, seconded by
Mr. Morrison.
Counselor Morrison. Anyone opposed? Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Be safe.
Karen?